Possible by a major grant from the John M. Olin Foundation, Incorporated. Additional support is provided by the Annenberg Foundation and the Friends of Firing Line.
Charlton Heston is, of course, all the things one thinks he is, including Ben-Hur and Moses, Michelangelo, and Captain Queeg. Yes, he has done over 70 of those movies that have entertained and continue to do so 2 generations of men, women, and children worldwide. What is relatively unusual about Charlton Heston is that he also writes. He has served on the National Endowment for the Arts, has written extensively for many magazines, including National Review, and now he has his autobiography called In the Arena. In this book, he takes us through his boyhood, his years at Northwestern, his extraordinary career. He even reveals the secret of how the chariot scene in Ben-Hur was handled. What especially focuses the attention these days on Hollywood is, of course, its politics and its values. The conventional answer to that question is that its politics reflect the politics of its viewers, which, as a matter of fact, isn't so. Given that most Americans are Republicans, and in Hollywood, all told, there are approximately 6 Republicans, and one of them is wavering. On the matter of family values, Hollywood is nicely positioned to say, if you don't like it, if you don't like sex and violence and incest and drag, why do you tune in? And that, of course, leads to the questions that touch on the free market. We know that the free market makes its allocations according to demand, but we cannot and probably should not abandon the sense that however latitudinarian its dispensations, there ought to be cultural monitors somewhere in the land, and they should exercise certain responsibilities. So let me begin by asking Mr. Heston this. Is in fact the appetite for sex and violence greater today than 50 years ago, and if so, why?
I think sex and violence have been part of drama since the Romans and certainly the Elizabethans. Certainly, it has been increasingly a feature of film. I think that the dangerous thing, and the thing that disturbs me at least, because I'm very comfortable with the protections offered by the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights on the right of artists to have a fairly free hand, not completely, but fairly free. But as Lenin presciently observed in, goodness, I think it was like 1919, very long ago, he said, the moving picture is the most powerful tool ever invented to shape the mind of man. Very smart fella.
From which you, well, no, that's smart.
Yes.
From which you conclude what?
From which I conclude that it can be dangerous. People believe somehow what they see in the moving image, more than what they see on the stage, more than what they read in books, more than what, in a curious way, often more than what religious clerics and even politicians tell them. If they see it in a movie, it somehow is true. And thus the increasingly bloody violence that we see in films, the increasingly prurient exploration of sexual coupling, has a stronger impact than if it were in a painting or a book. And I think that's dangerous.
I mean, Sophocles and Aeschylus dealt with violence, God knows, and...
mostly off stage in their case.
Well, almost necessarily, I guess.
Yes.
They weren't that many actors to slaughter. So the themes, if I understand you correctly, are universal themes, but there is an elaboration of violence and
Indeed.
of sex.
Indeed.
That seems to me particularized to this age, and of course doable because of television. Now, the Romeo and Juliet is a very erotic play, if read
And
with,
includes
if read with
very
imagination.
harsh language, which is often vulgarized.
That's right.
Up until a decade or so ago.
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct.
The body hand of the dial and so forth.
When the Song of Solomon was also vulgarized.
Yes.
Isn't it? But I guess the question before the House is, there was a school of thought which made a big pitch in the late 60s, or late 50s, early 60s. I think of Walter Burns, Gertrude Himmelfarb, Irving Kristol, who said it is the proper business of society to draw a line. And the First Amendment wasn't devised to protect obscenity. Now, given your attachment to the First Amendment, have you drawn that line for yourself?
Yes, I have. I think what it amounts to is the First Amendment at least strongly implies that it's inappropriate for government to legislate what may and may not be shown. Obviously, it's perfectly true. You can't show anything no one would dream of making, and if they did make it, you couldn't release, say, a film displaying in much detail the torture, rape, and murder of a 4-year-old girl. It would be absolutely unacceptable, as the film Showgirls recently done.
Why is it unacceptable?
There still is a line that no one will cross.
There's a line that you and I observe, and other people observe. For instance, if you're under 18, you can't act in a pornographic movie. Well, I'm all in favor of that. But suppose somebody said, why shouldn't that be 17? What do we draw on that gives us that line? Another example, I had an exchange with Alan Dershowitz at Harvard a few years ago. I said, well, would you be against a snuff film? The snuff film is where the guy gets killed.
Really gets killed.
Yeah, really gets killed. Well, he said, of course, murder is illegal in America. I said, well, suppose he was killed in Antarctica, where there are no laws. Could you run that film? And well, he didn't like that question much. He wanted to run a bit. Yeah. But
people never like questions to which they don't have adequate answers.
That's right, especially lawyers. But so where is that line, and how do you give it life?
Well, as a filmmaker, I draw the line myself.
Sure, you won't act in the film, that's right.
Yes. And the audience is not a bad monitor. We saw within the past month the failure of a really rather horrifying little film called Kids that actually used, although they insisted they were not underage actors in quite gratuitous scenes. The film Jade, which was expected to be quite spectacularly successful, was a complete flop. So was Showgirls.
What about the Chainsaw Massacre? The Chainsaw Massacre?
Those are sort of comic. Those don't disturb me as much as a film like Showgirls, or Kids, or Jade. But happily, they all failed spectacularly.
Well, are you saying that we are ultimately dependent on the public not to patronize?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm
character?
saying the public does function to a surprising degree, and I think the rating system is useful. If parents paid attention to the rating system and did not allow their children to attend R-rated films, I think that performs a useful function. What I'm trying to pick as a filmmaker and a film-goer is some path to thread through the mazes of the First Amendment and the rights of the artist and so on, and the avoidance of legislation.
We have had the Supreme Court rule that you can't plead the First Amendment when the manifest purpose of a particular book or a particular film is pornographic without any shred of social motive. So that means you can put Fanny Hill and have in Chapter 11 say Social Security is a good idea, and then resume coupling and get through that particular barrier. Now, isn't it your impression that there has been an evasion in the years since that law was laid down by that finding was laid down by the Supreme
Well,
Court.
we have seen some pretty spectacular transgressions in this area. In my view, I'm thinking it's not movies, but it is, or was purported to be, entertainment. And in the rap music a few years ago, and I'm happy to point out, a spectacular victory over Time Warner.
You did, yeah.
And I said to...
Which you describe in your book.
Yeah, I describe in the book. And there was a rap singer called Ice-T who had a CD called Cop Killers, which was a spectacularly graphic depiction of the murder of policemen. And it also included a section on a fantasized sodomizing of the nieces of the present Vice President of the United States. And having a few shares of Time Warner stock, I was able to attend a stockholders meeting and did what I think none of the other 1,000 or so stockholders had ever heard. I read the lyrics, and to stunned silence, and Gerald Levin...
They couldn't even quote them in the papers.
No, they couldn't quote them. And I went out afterwards, and I sort of repeated what I'd said, and the reporters said, yeah, but we can't print that. And I said, yeah, but Time Warner is selling it.
Yeah.
And I said to Levin, I said, Mr. Levin, if the name of this song had been Fag Killers, and its last line had been Die Kike Die, would you still have published that? And he had no complete answer. As I said, I remember that with great relish.
Well, I think you, I think you would, but let's leave that for a moment, and I want to ask you about a recent article by Michael Medved said that per impossibile, religion is creeping back into Hollywood in the sense that a depiction of a minister or priest doesn't have to show him as a bigamist or an adulterer or a sodomist. That there's something going on there. Question, is that a reflection of a public appetite, or is it Hollywood working internally, feeling that some balance ought to be struck?
I would like to believe the latter is true, but I think they are responding instead to what they perceive as market forces.
Mm-hmm.
And as has been said more than once in Hollywood, it's not the money, it's the money.
Well, let me ask you then, as an artistic question, it's when you have a life in which a saintly woman or man figures, it's not terribly easy to make it sexy, is it?
They tried very hard with the Scarlet Letter. With nude bathing scenes.
Yeah, but there was no saintly person there, was it? Well, of course
yes,
there was. Yeah,
the
sure.
Reverend
Yeah, that's right.
We saw the Reverend Dimmonsdale.
Yeah, but it had to have that element, say, going my way, with Bing Crosby. The devil wasn't very conspicuous there.
Indeed
now,
not.
Is this an artistic problem? The one thinks of, say, the life of Christ, done, that 8-hour business done 10 years ago, which was remarkable. But if you were a studio head and the decision came out, I want to have a picture in which there's a minister or a priest who's an inspiring guy, would your tendency be to say that'd be pretty hard to write or get written because there's no man-bite dogs in it?
That's a very, very interesting question, Bell, which is what you say when you don't know the answer. I had, now again, not as a film, but successfully released on Arts and Entertainment, and then in video, and now shortly in CD-ROM. You see how cleverly I'm sliding this in. A series on...
this is after they read the book.
Yes, after they read the book, yes. On the Bible. Which is doing very well. And it's, I don't know that they can't make the Ten Commandments again because it would cost too much. That's a money problem. You can't make any of the epics anymore. But I think if they could, they would have remade those films by now. George Stevens' greatest story ever told.
Well, but you are then talking about the epics, but suppose you were to ask for a contemporary movie featuring a Mother Teresa type. Would it be possible to do that and have in it enough emotional or aesthetic excitement to bring the public to it enthusiastically?
One thinks of Gandhi,
question.
which was a film about a religious figure, albeit not
well,
Christian.
but I wouldn't have thought that the religious aspect of that movie was in any sense.
You're probably
dominant,
right
would you?
about that. I was searching for a successful response there.
Well, what about, say, Going My Way? That was a very, very successful movie 40 years ago.
Indeed.
Would something like it, or say Father Flanagan,
Boys
Town,
Town,
yeah.
yes.
You couldn't sell that now, could you?
That would be hard to sell. On the other hand, on television, they had Little House on the Prairie, which had a sympathetic minister as one of the running characters.
It is a man by dog story, isn't it?
Yes,
I suppose,
yes, I think so.
Businessmen are almost always evil in the movies.
And any military man above the
military
rank
man.
of major.
That's right, yeah. It's
Indeed,
associated.
often now, which disturbs me very much. And this is a development in the last 20 years. Almost any authority figure, even assistants to the president in one of the Clancy novels, not as it was in the novel, but as adapted for the screen for Paramount, the President of the United States turned out to be the bad guy. The President of the United States, the gradual...
That's the terrible realism, isn't
it's
it?
more than just sex and... Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes. He said that, I didn't say that.
No, yeah, so the iconoclastic imperative to dress down somebody who has an august reputation.
Or even
is
a
terribly
respectable public reputation.
Yeah, yeah.
Senators, congressmen, lawyers. Now, you know, one remembers Mr. Shakespeare's opinion of lawyers, but still, it's there's very little respect for even teachers are often, and ministers and priests.
Or even sort of wise men. Who was Mickey Rooney's father? Do you remember? He was a very Solomonic judge.
Judge Hardy.
Hardy, yeah.
Judge Hardy, there you are.
Judge Hardy characters would have a hard time, wouldn't they? They'd be unemployed.
Exactly, yes. The figure of that kind is likely to be a homeless wanderer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, who probably wants to seduce
Or
the
possibly a reformed drug dealer.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, now that impinges a little bit on the political question, and you touched on it in your book, though there are passages in it that prompt the reader to ask for more. Why is the zeitgeist in Hollywood so left-oriented?
I'm asked that all the time, Bill, and I've thought about it a lot. Certainly, the overwhelming majority of actors and writers, to a lesser degree directors, to an even lesser degree producers and studio heads, but actors and writers tend to be not only liberals, but kind of 1935 Roosevelt liberals.
That would be a relief, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I'm not certain, but what your estimate of the number of conservatives in Hollywood isn't excessive. There may not be as many as 6 of us. But I have 2 explanations for that. In only hypotheses, obviously, unprovable. For one thing, acting is a very insecure profession, and even very successful actors are aware of the fact that a serious physical injury, say the loss of a foot or something, which would not spoil a lawyer's or a teacher's or an executive's career or even a high-ranking man in the military or in government. But an actor's career can end at any moment, just as an athlete, a pro football player. It can be over like that. Actors are very aware of this and thus tend to have a concern they perhaps otherwise would not feel, of sympathy for people, the possibility of hard times destroying everything. The other explanation that I have that's occurred to me is that actors and writers make their livings with their imaginations, with their feelings, and thus they put a great deal of faith in them. I may play a part in which I may have to burst into tears at the death of a character that hasn't even been cast yet.
Somebody other than Rabin.
Yes, other than Rabin. A fictional character. What's Hecuba to him or he to Hecuba that he should weep for her?
Well, that's just a skill you got to develop, right?
Yes, but still, the use of that skill, the use of your emotions, makes you put a lot of faith in your emotions. And it seems to me plausible that therefore actors rely on their emotions for making intellectual decisions, which is not a wise move.
You mean
I remember once
they become
debating.
more ostentatious than your emotions.
I remember debating, I think the hot issue at the time was the unilateral nuclear freeze with an actor who shall be nameless. And I said, have you read this piece, an article that had been published? And he said, I don't need to read that. He said, this is a gut issue. I know what I feel. I said, we have nothing I can debate you with then. But I mean, actors feel that. What they feel, they put great faith in. I think many of us try to use our minds rather than our feelings for things like that.
Oh, that's a very novel.
It's the only two answers I can think of.
Interesting insight. Would that be true, say, of musicians? Because they express themselves emotionally in their music? It happens, by the way, to be true.
Does it?
Most musicians are left Democrats, yeah.
Well, then maybe that's true.
Maybe
then.
that's true, yeah.
Yes, a violinist, if his hand is crippled, his career is over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, years ago, Adolphe Marjou was on this program, and he said that in Hollywood, if one developed Republican tendencies, the reaction was almost immediate. That is, say, the retaliatory action. Maury Riskin said the same thing in an article in National Review, that if you found yourself at a fund appeal for a Republican candidate, you felt almost immediately the impact of resentment by your associates. Now, does that depend, is that only true for people of marginal talent, but not true of people who are wanted more by the producers than need the producers?
I think that's perhaps so. I have never felt that I lost a job because of my conservative
And John
opinions.
Wayne probably didn't,
No.
Jimmy Stewart.
And there are far more young conservatives among actors and writers and directors now. And I've had some of them say to me, well, it's all very well for you, Chuck. You're secure. I might lose a job. I'm not certain I believe that's true, although I'm ashamed to confess that Hollywood has officially blacklisted Vanessa Redgrave, arguably the best actress in the world, because of her
On the Zionist
anti-Zionism.
question?
Yes,
Yeah.
solely on that issue.
Yeah.
And I think that's shocking. They should be ashamed of themselves. But I think there are probably more closet conservatives in Hollywood than there are closet homosexuals at this point.
That means a lot, huh?
Yes.
Well, but how do you answer this? I hadn't even noticed it, but somebody said to me, you know, in 30 years, there really hasn't been an anti-communist movie in Hollywood. He was kind of a wag. He said the last one was Ninotchka.
Yes.
And
That's about right.
and I thought, and you know, they even changed the title of James Bond movie to make it not the Soviet Union versus us, but
Yes.
Schmerz or whatever it was.
Schmerz.
Yeah. Now, why did the anti-communist cause never capture the theatrical imagination of Hollywood?
Well, there were a lot of...
Unlike, say, the anti-Nazi cause.
Yes. This was before, when those films, when that change was made, this was slightly before I was out there, but I think I understand what happened. In the first place, there were, of course, communists in in the country in the 30s has been amply established, Elia Kazan and so forth. And we had the unfortunate and really shocking HUAC hearings and the loss of employment to many people, the unfriendly 10, as Billy Wilder has pointed out. You have to remember only 2 of them were talented, the rest were just unfriendly. But certainly to deny employment to anyone was bad, and they shouldn't have done it. Nonetheless, the reaction since in films like, I've forgotten the film Woody Allen made. You remember?
You mean a lot.
Yes. No, the one about the
we have only
the
a half
blacklisting.
minute. So,
the blacklisting.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the impression, even still in Hollywood, who the American Film Institute denied Elia Kazan an award because he was a confessed communist, and they don't like to think any of them really were communists.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Charlton Heston, author of In the Arena, an autobiography.
Thank you, Bill.
This program was a Warren Steibel production in association with South Carolina ETV. Funding for Firing Line was made possible by a major grant from the John M. Olin Foundation, Incorporated. Additional support was provided by the Annenberg Foundation and the Friends of Firing Line.